Welcome to Sci-fi Quantum Archives. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore. The road twisted through forest too thick for sunlight, too old for map. Fog hung low across the gravel, pulling sound down with it. Trees leaned in just slightly more than they should, not quite conspiratorial, but not passive either. For vehicles, dust-washed, underfunded, overburdened, grumbled toward their temporary grave at the mountain's foot. The lead truck's antenna had snapped 2 kilometers back. No one stopped to fix it. Above them, the limestone wall looked less like terrain and more like a closed door, 50 meters high, sheer from ground to treeline. Birds had gone silent 2 days before arrival. One of the researchers noticed. She didn't mention it. A rockslide had peeled open part of the slope during last month's rain. Locals said nothing of it. A shepherd found the gap first, returned without his dog. Officials filed it as nonsense. But funding got approved. Some bureaucrat in Tbilisi needed seismic reports before winter set in. Contracts got signed. Salaries cleared. Boots hit gravel. 6 stepped out. Equipment unloaded in silence. No introductions. No need. Most had worked together before, on dams, tunnels, failed early warning systems. Not a team built for theories. A team built to map what could break. The gap in the wall didn't look inviting. It wasn't wide enough for bravado or poetry. Just a split, shoulder-high, jagged at the edges like something had opened its mouth and changed its mind halfway through. Tension coiled quietly in everyone's chest, without discussion, without cause. Not fear. Not yet. Something else. Like knowing the shape of something you've never seen. Boots crunched dry lichen. Steel cases hit soil. One sensor refused to calibrate. Another blinked red without reason, its manufacturer long gone bankrupt. A joke passed between 2 of them, low and mechanical, the kind that dies on arrival. Wind moved, but only the lowest branches responded. Pine needles didn't shift above head height. The independent researcher stood apart, scribbling against a clipboard, though the paper remained blank. Some habits weren't about data. 30 meters inside, where the rock turned darker and the air took on weight, instruments began drifting out of sync. Not by minutes, not even seconds, but drift nonetheless. Watches disagreed by fractions. Compasses pulsed without direction. A single step forward became impossible to measure in terms of time. So measurements stopped. They logged nothing. Not officially. Not that day. A drone failed to return. Its feed looped back 30 seconds of its launch, then static. Static that didn't hiss but breathed, slow and off-pattern. No conversation on the hike down mentioned these things. One left a recorder running during lunch. Playback included a voice no one recognized. It spoke nothing but coordinates, each set a degree off from the last. Nobody left. Not out of courage, but inertia. Gear needed testing. Ground had to be surveyed. Time moved. At least outside. No one argued this. Later, one of them would try to explain what the cave looked like. Couldn't do it. Not exactly. Called it a fold. A bend. A misalignment. The others stopped describing it altogether. Not because they disagreed, but because each description altered something. Slightly. The camp never fully assembled. Tents stood, but no one used them. Sleep arrived uninvited, in sitting positions, mid-task. Food tasted wrong but spoiled nothing. Batteries drained faster than usual, yet power stayed. No animal sounds. Not even insect. On the 3rd day, 2 stood beside the entrance and swore it had narrowed. No marks showed movement. No rock had shifted. But the gap breathed differently, like it had begun remembering who entered. The structural engineer placed a marker at the entrance. A white flag tied to a carbon rod. Within an hour, 3 separate team members reported seeing 2 flags. Not beside each other, layered. One over the other. As if time couldn't decide which one had been placed first. A decision formed. No vote. No declaration. Just a consensus groan between silences. Further entry would wait. Instruments would recalibrate. Notes would be cross-checked. The gap had widened again by morning. Only by inches. Enough for one of them to say it aloud, and the others not to reply. Enough for a pair of boots to move a step closer and pause. Enough for someone to notice that none of them could remember who had driven which vehicle up the mountain. Wind shifted, and this time, even the higher branches moved. But no leaves fell. Not one. The first steps inside felt normal only in memory. The ground responded as expected, gravel under boot, a certain give beneath sediment. Breath turned sharp as the air cooled, but lungs adjusted. Headlamps swept forward, beams broken by stone that refused to reflect. Shadows landed where light had no reason to stop. No one spoke about the temperature drop. It hadn't changed enough to alarm, just enough to notice, just enough to hold it in. The silence didn't grow. It arrived fully formed, somewhere near the mouth of the corridor, where moss no longer clung to the walls and the floor lost its grain. The first device to fail was the biometric scanner. Heart rates spiked without exertion. Oxygen readings fluctuated, then flatlined, though no one gasped or staggered. The tech tapped the monitor, reset it twice, gave up. Another sensor read ambient noise at 0, yet they could still hear their own movement. Footfalls, backpack straps shifting, zipper teeth catching wool. Cameras lagged. One frame in 10 stuttered, then duplicated. A pair of images came back time-stamped 5 seconds apart, but captured the same motion mid-gesture. No blur. Just 2 identical frames from different timestamp. Compasses spun once, then corrected, only to freeze without reason. No magnetic pull. No interference. Watches disagreed by milliseconds, then full seconds, across wrists worn side by side. They compared the GPS unit. One blinked green. The other refused to lock coordinates, reading elevation as negative. No sulfur trace. No radon. No carbon monoxide. The air tasted clean. Sterile, almost. No decay. Not even the dry scent of mineral buildup. Just cold that didn't belong to any altitude. Cold that didn't come from above or below, but from somewhere left of the body. Footsteps stopped sinking. One would step forward, another would hear it a moment too soon. A water bottle fell, but sound reached the group as if it had dropped underwater. It struck the ground in real time, but the impact didn't feel finished. The narrow passage opened slightly ahead, though not in any symmetrical sense. One wall bowed outward in a way the other didn't compensate for. It gave the illusion of leaning, but the ceiling stayed flat. They advanced without discussion. No need to agree. One of them raised a camera again, clicked the shutter, and checked the preview. No image. Just a gray square with a timestamp and nothing else. Another camera showed a photo before it was taken, a boot mid-step in a position no one remembered making. They checked external power bank. All full. Devices still drained. A thermal lens caught shapes but not heat. Blurred bodies. No outline. A hand waved in front of it came back as a smear. Someone dropped a geophone to record tremors. It pinged twice, then logged 14 seconds of silence broken by 5 irregular pulses. Not seismic. More like breath caught in stone. Their voices softened without effort. Speech came slower. Not from caution, but from some internal shift that made language feel expensive. Each word chosen like stepping onto thin ice. No light source flickered. Batteries held. Yet beams warped at the edges, not dimming, just bending, as if distance curved inward. Contact with base failed. Radios connected, then reset. Messages transmitted were received by the same unit that sent them. A loop with no origin. Further in, the floor rose. Only a few inches, but too smooth to be natural. A ridge with no tectonic cause. Like something had tried to grow and changed its mind. Still they walked. Measurements stopped. Clocks disagreed with memory. Shadows fell sideways against the slope. Not uphill. Not downhill. Just sideways. They kept going. Not because they believed in the data. Not even for discovery. They kept going because something had shifted, not around them, but behind them. Steps no longer pointed back toward the entrance. Not in the same way. No one said it. But each of them felt it. Not a closing. Not a trap. A tilt. Subtle. Like a picture frame 2 degrees off center. Like a heartbeat caught between ticks. Inside that corridor, time hadn't stopped. It hadn't moved forward either. It had turned. Slightly. Just enough for everything to continue. Just not in the direction they remembered coming from. Tents rose without confidence. No one hammered stakes too deep, as if the ground might object. The camp formed near the treeline, where radio signals still flickered back to life, if only for seconds. Equipment sprawled in cautious arcs, recorders, tripods, sensors watching nothing. They faced the cave like it might shift positions. Audio logs began as routine. Ambient scans, frequency sweeps, timed callouts. Voices recorded as expected, rough through cheap mics, cluttered by wind and the occasional drag of boots on gravel. But the wind disappeared by nightfall. Its absence sharpened everything else. Background noise turned into a hiss that didn't stay flat. It pulsed. Not loud. Not even sharp. Just enough to hear without noticing. One channel caught a repeating interval, 3 seconds on, 4 off, then silence. It returned every 11 minutes. Not perfectly, but close. At first, it was shrugged off as signal bleed, a satellite artifact. A timestamp confirmed otherwise. The pattern began 5 minutes after the recorder was powered on. Before the team entered the cave. No known device matched the interval. Another recorder captured what sounded like 2 voices overlapping. Played aloud, it mirrored a conversation that had taken place earlier in the day. Every word matched. Tone, timing, even hesitation. The problem wasn't the content. It was the angle. The playback sounded as if recorded from 6 meters to the left. But no mic had moved. They logged the anomaly, compared notes, ignored it for the night. Rotations began at sunrise. Pairs entered the corridor in staggered shifts, no more than an hour each. Nothing formal, nothing announced. Assignments shifted on instinct. No one argued. Some returned visibly disturbed, though no one said why. One sat down after his shift and asked for tea twice in the same sentence. When told he had already spoken, confusion passed like a shadow across his face. He didn't ask again. One camera lost time. It recorded 38 minutes into a 40-minute session, then reset itself to minute 12 without erasing the prior footage. The result was an overlapping dialogue, identical, but with different environmental cues. Gravel moved, breath hitched, a sigh landed where it hadn't before. Side-by-side playback revealed the same moment captured twice, but different. Like the conversation reoccurred not as memory, but as reenactment. No second take. Just repetition. Other patterns emerged. One team member corrected herself mid-sentence, citing a word she hadn't said. The transcript showed the word anyway. Another returned from the cave and mentioned a smell none of the others noticed. Earth, yes. Dust, yes. But she described citrus. Not strong. Just trace. Like something preserved too long. Handwritten logs showed timestamps that contradicted digital ones by seconds at first, then minute. Eventually by full hours. A notebook recorded someone entering the cave at 10:30, though camera footage placed them there 20 minutes earlier. No one noticed until both records were compared. The person in question denied having written the entry. The audio static changed. Its rhythm gained shape. Less random, more like breathing, 3 short bursts, 1 long. When isolated and played back at high speed, it produced something close to a pulse. Not mechanical. Not natural. Too slow for a human. Too irregular for a machine. At 2:13 a.m., one recorder picked up what sounded like whispering layered beneath the signal. Not words. Not syllables. Just something too structured to be wind. When filtered, the sound formed a wave that repeated every 4 seconds for 12 minutes, then ceased. One morning, a photograph appeared in the feed queue. No one recalled taking it. It showed 4 of them at the entrance, heads turned inward. The sky was overcast. No one remembered clouds that day. One face was missing its reflection in a nearby metal case. Sleep shortened. Those who rested spoke of dreams that weren't dreams. Not nightmares. Replays. Moments already lived, but altered. One woke with the taste of salt in her mouth. Another remembered a sentence spoken by someone else before it had been said. Not just content. Word for word. Same inflection. Same pause. The logs grew inconsistent. No one trusted the equipment, but no one trusted their notes either. Observations were written, scratched out, rewritten differently. Some crossed out their own handwriting without recognizing it. A drone launched into the cave came back 4 minutes early according to its onboard clock. The footage it carried ended before it reached the halfway point. On screen, the device hovered, paused, rotated slightly, then the feed stuttered. The same second repeated. Not in a loop, but as if time refused to proceed. Someone tried to recalibrate the equipment using a quartz oscillator. It failed to hold rhythm for longer than 10 minutes. Drift increased with proximity to the cave. Instruments placed near the wall lost sync even faster. By the 5th day, no one mentioned time aloud. Watches stayed on wrists unread. Phones remained off. Chronology became less useful than observation. Words like before or after stopped meaning what they were meant to. The camp functioned, but only barely. People ate without hunger, slept without peace, moved without urgency. The cave no longer appeared passive. It didn't impose. It responded. And not once. Across hundreds of hours of recordings, notes, footage, and live observation, not once did the static remain random. It carried form. A shape trying to stabilize. Or already stable. Just unfamiliar. He asked for silence before he entered. No ceremony. No tracking. Just space. One bag slung over his shoulder, another gripped by the handle, plastic rations, 3 liters of water, 3 notebooks, 4 pens, 1 recorder, 2 power cells, a biometric vest that never quite sat flat against his chest. His voice had lowered over the last 2 days. Not out of fatigue. More like compression. Each word fit too tightly into his mouth, as if language was bending under its own weight. He walked into the cave without looking back. No one followed. No one marked the time, not aloud. His watch recorded the moment, 9:41 a.m., but no one trusted that anymore. The first 6 hours passed without signal. The cave consumed transmissions like sand drinks water. No return, no distortion, just absence. At the 12-hour mark, the biometric feed glitched once, then reconnected. Heart rate normal. Body temperature low. No movement logged for nearly 90 minutes. Then a spike. 97 steps in under 5 minutes. Sudden halt. Another gap. His voice came through the recorder twice, identical phrases separated by 9 minutes. Both samples contained the same cough, same pen scratch, same whispered date. He spoke the day as Thursday. It was Monday. By hour 21, one of the notebooks appeared at camp. Not carried. Not left. Just found beneath a folded tarp no one had touched. Ink fresh. Cover warm. Half the entries were nonsense. Coordinates that didn't exist. Sketches of cave walls no one recognized. Between the nonsense, 2 journal pages written word for word like one already recorded earlier that week. Identical in punctuation, phrasing, hesitation. The vest reported erratic oxygen levels by hour 30. No distress signal. Just a rolling drop and recovery every 16 minutes. Pressure data began feeding symbols instead of numbers. Triangles, repeating dots, blank segments. The system wasn't designed to display anything but values. At 36 hours, no one moved toward the entrance. Not immediately. The group waited for something, a signal, a sound, anything resembling certainty. Nothing arrived. Only stillness. He walked out slowly, boots dragging small channels in the dust. Face slack. Not blank, not hollow. Just unused. Like his features had been placed there after forgetting how they once fit. He asked what day it was. Twice. Each time with the same tone, like asking someone's name at a funeral. When told, He didn't respond. Eyes settled on the ridge above camp, but not with focus. Not even confusion. Recognition without origin. The bag he carried in was heavier on return. No extra supplies, but the weight had shifted. Nothing spilled. Nothing missing. No one asked about it. Later, someone checked the recorder. 43 hours of data. It shouldn't have been possible. Files stacked in reverse order. First file timestamped 5 minutes after the last. Audio clean. No gap. In the first entry, he described packing supplies. In the last, he recited a conversation that had not yet occurred. He joined a campfire without speaking. Someone asked about his shift. He nodded. Reached for a cup no one had passed him. Set it down. Spoke a sentence no one understood, until 2 hours later, when another team member used the same words to describe a malfunction in the signal array. When confronted about it, he blinked twice and asked what was being discussed. He didn't remember the cup, or the fire, or how long he'd been back. Another notebook surfaced 3 days later, under a crate beside the medical kit. Not his handwriting, but every word matched the entries in his journal. Even the corrections. No one remembered him sleeping. Not once. His hands remained clean despite no washing. His tent remained unzipped, undisturbed. His voice began arriving before his presence. He'd speak, only for heads to turn and find him not yet there. A moment later, he'd enter frame. When asked what the cave was, he smiled once. Short, brief. No humor. No irony. Just a slight upward pull of the lip, like remembering a word you're not supposed to say out loud. After that, no one entered the cave alone. Not again. The first sign came quietly. A misplaced tool set, logged as used, logged again 10 minutes later as untouched. No one claimed to move it. The logbook showed 2 different handwritings, both from the same person. Ink identical. Pressure uneven. Morning conversations fractured. Someone referenced a cracked drone wing no one remembered damaging. The drone was intact. Its flight history clean. Still, the comment repeated twice more that day, from separate mouths, as if echoing a memory someone hadn't lived but knew by shape. Lunch missed its hour by 43 minutes. No one noticed until one plate remained untouched and cold. No one remembered whose it was. The owner sat among them. Silent. Hands resting on his knees, eyes fixed on nothing. When spoken to, he nodded once and asked who brought the food. He'd done it. Half an hour earlier. One man vanished mid-sentence. Not in panic. Not with noise. Just absence. He had been speaking about the incline near the cave's second chamber, describing a slope none of the others had measured. Voice clear. Words steady. Silence followed. His seat remained warm. A search began, half-hearted, driven more by impulse than protocol. The map showed no path he could have taken without passing at least 2 others. No one saw him leave. Radios called out his name. No static returned. No voice. 2 hours later, he reappeared near the mess unit, coat unzipped, carrying a sample bag labeled with the previous day's date. He asked why the tents had moved. No one had moved them. They hadn't shifted an inch. His report made no sense. Descriptions of an alcove filled with moisture. Stalactites melting into the floor. No such structure existed in any part of the cave they'd mapped. He insisted. Pointed to soil samples. The pH was normal. The bag smelled faintly of copper. The biometric vest once again began transmitting data from the cave interior. No one wore it. It had been sealed in a crate under inventory lock. The signal logged 20 minutes of movement at a crawl, 12 meters across 8 hours, with a regular heartbeat spike. Heaviness grew without clear source. Not emotional. Not physical. More like weight in the air. A kind that bent attention. Speech began to misalign. One sentence overlapped another before the first had finished. 2 people attempted to describe different things at the same time, using the same word. The recordings showed no overlap. Only one speaker. Both voices were remembered clearly. Journal entries duplicated themselves in notebooks. Identical phrasing. Same spelling errors. 2 pages apart. Written in different pens. One woman drew a diagram of the interior layout. Arched tunnels. A fracture line running beneath a subchamber. The sketch was folded, placed inside her field manual. An hour later, it appeared in his pack. Folded the same. Same ink. When confronted, he blinked twice and laughed quietly. Said he hadn't seen that diagram before. Said the folds looked like his. Said nothing more. Mood changes arrived mid-conversation. Calm to withdrawn. Focused to distracted. One man hummed without knowing. Another corrected a sentence seconds before it was spoken. Objects stopped behaving as they should. A compass needle refused to settle but didn't spin. Just leaned. A plastic spoon melted without heat. The radio played a log that hadn't been recorded yet. When checked later, the file existed. Timestamp 6 hours ahead. Time refused to sequence. A pair of boots found near the cave mouth were later spotted in use, on the feet of someone standing across the fire. Eyes met across the table without recognition. Only seconds passed. But it was long enough to make one of them leave the circle. They stopped asking questions. Not out of fear. Not confusion. But because each question introduced another version of the answer, and each version arrived wearing the same face. The cave had stopped being inside. It had started reaching outward layer by layer without distance. Not spreading. Folding. And every time someone blinked, they wondered if they would open their eyes in the same place. Not where they had been. Just close enough to pretend. The cave no longer functioned as space. Distance lost its bargain with time. Movement did not mean progress. Steps no longer linked to direction. They started mapping paths, only to find the same routes doubled back in unfamiliar configurations. Not mirrored. Not reversed. As if the cave redrew itself in agreement with memory instead of stone. 2 members set out with marked chalk, tagging their passage with red symbols every 6 meters. By the 10th mark, they returned to the first without turning. Same crack in the rock. Same small shift in air pressure. But their water bottles had emptied by a third. Their watches disagreed on how long they'd been gone. Neither recalled speaking during the walk, yet both remembered a conversation about where the sun might be. When asked what time of day it felt like, neither answered. Gear began repeating itself. One night, a second thermal scanner appeared beside the battery cases. Identical scratches, identical calibration. It had been logged and packed by a different member 12 hours earlier and stored beneath lock. Both scanners worked. Neither could be confirmed as original. One morning brought worse. A second camp, 200 meters off the main trail, past a formation they didn't recognize. Tents pitched, stove warm, notes written. Not similar. Identical. A black pen beside a logbook contained the same list of coordinates made the previous evening. Identical handwriting. Same coffee stain in the bottom corner of the page. The food cache had been opened, 2 bars missing. The radio there was powered on. Channel open. No voices. No insects crawled through it. No signs of age. The same jacket one of them wore now lay folded on a crate inside the second camp, sleeves crossed. When they returned to check, the jacket they'd been wearing had changed. Same color. Different tear pattern on the left shoulder. Not everyone wanted to revisit it. The cave had stopped being a tunnel. It had become a shape. Not one that could be drawn. More like terrain pressed flat, then folded until direction blurred. Forward became beside. Sequences repeated without pattern. 2 conversations occurred simultaneously, both recalled from different points of view. One heard a question before asking it. The other denied it had been asked. A metal peg nailed into the wall as a test reappeared 10 meters deeper inside, identical in wear. It was removed, carried back, placed into storage. That night, another appeared beside the fire pit, half embedded in gravel. Food packets duplicated. One person unwrapped a bar only to find it already opened. Inside, teeth marks. The same shape as their own bite. Same missing piece. Someone tried to record their location audibly. They spoke into a mic every 10 minutes, announcing position and time. After the 6th entry, playback revealed 12 files. Half contained words not spoken aloud. One recording included a second voice that responded before the first had finished. The second voice matched tone, cadence, rhythm. When slowed, it matched pitch as well. Heat signatures didn't hold shape. Thermal maps of the passage showed corridors where none had been walked. Temperature readouts spiked where no body stood. When followed, the warmth faded mid-step, as if whoever made the imprint had left behind the wrong version of themselves. A mug dropped near the entrance shattered into 3 large pieces. Hours later, another team member retrieved it, intact, warm, filled halfway with water. The person who dropped it hadn't told anyone. No one had cleaned the shards. Language lost certainty. Definitions twisted mid-use. A common phrase repeated enough times began to sound wrong. Words took on the shape of memories instead of meaning. Some stopped speaking entirely. Notes replaced speech. Notes began copying themselves across pages. Different ink. Same sentence. Crossed out and rewritten identically. No one asked how long they had been inside. Time had lost the weight of consequence. Not stopped. Not stretched. Just misaligned. One found their own handwriting in a notebook they'd never used. The page was dated 4 days ahead. Laughter came once. Dry. Short. Not tied to anything. No one claimed it. No one moved the second camp. It remained where it had been found. Perfect. Unused. Waiting. Voices stopped carrying. Radios bled into silence. Antennas stood straight but transmitted nothing. One message arrived hours after it was sent, half-clipped, the words cut mid-syllable. No response followed. No repetition. Just that single looped phrase. We're still inside, but the outside, followed by blank audio, not static. The camp split. Not by conflict. Not by design. Just movement without cohesion. One pair searched for alternate exit. A trail eastward curved behind the known boundary. They followed it for 90 minutes, marked each turn. Their footsteps met gravel at a passage they knew too well. Same bend in the rock. Same scuff on the wall. They recognized the corridor, but from the wrong direction. They had re-entered from behind. Their own voices caught on the recorder 10 minutes before they reached the loop. Different words. Same cadence. Same fatigue. Another tried mapping the interior again. Linework began as geometric segments, angles assigned to distances. Halfway through, the lines coiled into themselves. Not abstract. Not artistic. Functional. A map not of location, but of condition. The structure fed back into itself, no end mark. The paper pulsed under touch, not from movement, but weight. A kind of pressure that made the ink look too dark. Conversations broke apart. A statement repeated itself halfway through its own reply. Disagreements sparked without cause. One voice raised an argument triggered silence from others who didn't recall speaking. A fight began twice. Each time with the same accusation, delivered in a different tone. No one remembered starting it. Everyone remembered ending it. Watches remained on wrists but no longer drew glances. Not out of acceptance. Out of disuse. Minutes could not be trusted. Hours were no longer categories. Sleep arrived out of sequence. Some woke before lying down. Others dozed through conversations no one recalled having. He stopped sleeping altogether. Sat at the edge of camp, knees pulled in, journal across his lap, pencil dragging without aim. He claimed sleep reset the order of his memory. That each time his eyes closed, he returned to earlier iterations of the same hour. That what was linear during consciousness scattered into fragments during rest. Dreams, he said, weren't the problem. Waking was. He spoke without rhythm. Not rambling. Just unanchored. Statements about future outcomes spoken like reflections. Apologies for things no one had experienced. Warnings delivered after the event. When asked what he meant, he frowned. Not in frustration. In recognition. like hearing a voice he hadn't expected to return. Gear began changing placement without contact. A camera once found recording inside a zipped bag. A lantern turned on despite a dead battery, placed at the center of camp without footprints in the dust around it. A pair of boots faced away from the cave when no one had worn them for days. One lens cap returned to its case, warm to the touch, though no hands had held it. One person forgot his name. Not lost to trauma, not confusion. Just absence. When asked again, he gave the name of someone who wasn't on the team. A name that appeared hours later, handwritten inside a closed notebook no one had used. Same name. Same date. 4 days ahead. Laughter became rare. Not due to fear. There was no space left for relief. The cave had stopped being a structure. It had become a climate. It did not respond. It existed. Within that condition, the human body began to stutter. Someone collapsed without injury. Eyes open. Mouth forming words half-heard in a different hour. He was helped to his feet, only to ask why everyone had gathered. He had been alone, he said. He'd been walking through what he thought was sleep. He described the camp from a position above, as if he'd seen it from the ceiling. A backpack left on the trail returned to camp before its owner. Same wear. Same contents. When the owner arrived, he asked why his notes had been moved. No one had touched them. No one had read them. But the notes had changed, same sketches, now annotated with events not yet occurred. Each annotation written in a pen that no longer existed among their gear. The cave's air no longer felt cold. Not warm either. Just precise. A temperature that responded to no season, no elevation. A neutrality that pressed on the nerves without causing discomfort. Just a nudge, invisible and constant. By the 9th day, no one asked what time it was. They asked where it had gone. Not meaning a specific hour. Not meaning the past. Just the shape time used to have before the cave reshaped how things followed each other. There were no more schedules. Only intervals between the next strange thing and the next forgotten one. Words left half-formed. Objects arriving twice. A team breaking without rupture. Shifting out of sync, but never fully apart. Only sideways. The thought of leaving began without words. No meeting. No vote. Just a series of glances held longer than usual, hands pausing mid-task, breath caught before speech. Something had shifted. Not in the cave, but in them. A soft accumulation of wrong that no longer felt curious. Fatigue no longer came from effort. It came from dislocation. One person packed early. No announcement. Just methodical motions. Rations, notebooks, batteries, rolled tent. Every action precise, careful, without haste. When asked where he was going, he didn't answer. Just pointed toward the path no one could confirm had ever led out. Another joined him. A third objected. A fourth hesitated. By evening, 4 separate plans had formed. Each swore theirs would lead out. One marked their trail with stones. One used chalk. One carried nothing but a map scratched into the back of a journal cover. The last simply walked, no preparation, just trust in direction remembered during sleep. No one left together. Too much disagreement. Too many paths that had looped when tested. She returned alone before the others departed. Eyes low, movements tight. A bandage on her forearm that hadn't been there before. She said nothing for several hours. Not about the trail. Not about what she saw. Not about who she passed. Just sat near the fire and avoided mirrors. The first to leave crossed the ridge line and vanished. Not quickly. Not like disappearance. Simply absent between one footfall and the next. His water bottle dropped at the edge, upright, half full. Another tried hours later. Her figure receded into the gap between 2 boulders. When she reappeared near the mess unit, her face held no recognition. Not of the place. Not of the people. She backed away when someone called her name. Clutched the recorder to her chest and asked where the others had gone. No one understood the question. She repeated it. Once more. Then again. The same phrasing. The same tone. 3 identical deliveries spaced by 1-minute intervals. She stopped after the third. Sat down without speaking. The device she held was reviewed that night. 1 file. 20 minutes long. She spoke into it as if giving a field report. Calm. Direct. Voice clear. She listed team members, describing their actions. None of the names matched those present. One of them had died years ago. Another had never worked in geology. She smiled twice during the recording. Laughed once. Referenced a joke no one had told. She asked a question. Received an answer. Male voice. No match found. She laughed again. Not deranged. Familiar. Comfortable. As if surrounded by people she trusted. She signed off the log with a date 5 months into the future. The timestamp matched the current hour. Someone watched the same footage 3 times and swore the background changed between viewings. A coffee mug on the table during the first playthrough was gone in the second. Returned in the third. A 5th exit attempt led to confusion. 2 left together. Only 1 came back. He remembered walking alone. Arguments fractured mid-sentence. Disputes over direction turned circular. One accused another of sabotage. The accused replied with a sentence the other hadn't spoken yet. Someone found a tent assembled behind the ridge, zipped shut. Inside, supplies arranged with care. Not new. Not old. Her own handwriting on a note pinned to the tent flap, instructing her to trust no one with the map. She didn't remember writing it. The handwriting was hers. The phrasing wasn't. Time outdoors began to resemble time inside. Shadows lost their source. A watch caught rain before the storm arrived. The fire burned hotter at dawn than it had through the night. 1 pair of boots dried overnight without being removed. Someone fell asleep. Woke to an empty camp. Not abandoned. Removed. No gear. No prints. Only silence. She walked for hours until she reached the ridge. Found them again, all seated. No one had noticed she'd left. Her boots were still where she'd taken them off. Dry. Food tasted strange. Coffee brewed at the same strength came out bitter one morning, sweet the next. Water boiled at too low a temperature. Twice, the fire didn't burn wood. Just heat. Suspended, shapeless, hovering above ash. One group attempted an escape at dusk. They walked beyond the tree line, compass held high. Hours passed. The sun didn't move. When they returned, the campfire had burned out long ago, but the logs remained warm. Laughter returned once. Brief. From someone watching a recording of herself. Not in disbelief. Not confusion. Joy. A moment recognized. Not remembered. When asked, she only said the others were different. Not wrong. Not bad. Just different. None of them mentioned the phrase anymore. No one said they wanted to leave. Because the question stopped being whether to exit. It became whether exit still meant return. Choice had become a shape. Not a decision. Not a path. A contour wrapped around perception. They did not know which version of themselves had made it out. Or if one already had. They didn't say goodbye. No one watched them go. Boots scuffed the ground once, twice, then vanished between fir and limestone. One carried nothing. The other held only a notebook and a cracked compass still ticking seconds that no longer belonged to anything. No map, no gear, no tether. Just forward, not because it promised escape, but because staying required a kind of belief they no longer had the shape for. They passed the tree line without sound. Wind refused to move through the canopy. Leaves shifted but did not fall. The trail behind them did not close, but neither could anyone retrace it. The feed remained active for an hour after they vanished. A lens turned slowly on its axis, fixed toward the entrance. It should have stopped recording after 12 minutes. It ran for 56. The final image captured did not come from the trail or the camp. It came from inside. A mirror had been propped against a pillar of stone near the main corridor. It had not been brought there. No one remembered placing it. The reflection held a figure seated cross-legged, facing the glass with hands folded. A voice murmured softly, lips moving in rhythm that didn't match the sound. Words came clearly, but the mouth lagged behind or raced ahead, never once aligning. His expression didn't change. Not during the pause. Not during the brief laugh caught on audio without source. The mirrored version lifted a hand. The figure in the room did not. Light fell across one face at a sharp angle, revealing no matching shift in the room itself. His body remained still, but the reflection leaned forward once, close to the glass, before freezing in place. The seated version remained motionless, eyes open. The file stopped recording at 3:07 a.m. It was never closed manually. Recovery teams found no wreckage, no gear, no fire pit, no footprint that lasted more than 20 steps. Only the mirror remained, untouched by dust, frame unblemished. No fingerprints, no surface scratch, just a faint, persistent warmth beneath the glass that no thermometer could measure. Two emerged weeks later. No one could say from where. No record showed their passage. No camera, no satellite ping, no trail marker. They were found walking down the side of a slope in weather too clear for their state. Clothes soaked, hands stained, voices measured. They were brought in separately. They gave names without prompting. Medicals showed no exposure, no dehydration, no muscular deterioration. Their boots were dry. Their teeth were clean. Their stories agreed in posture but diverged in fact. One described a collapse. Dust choking the chamber, pressure building behind the stone. He spoke of the cave folding inward, as if exhaling in reverse. He remembered screams from somewhere behind him, cut off mid-breath. Said he barely made it to the ridge before the entrance sealed itself in silence. The other recalled no collapse. Spoke of walking for days through corridors that rotated around a fixed point. She never heard a sound. No shouting. No shift in air. Only a widening sense of displacement. She described finding a window inside the stone, not physical, not imagined, just there. Through it, she said, the camp looked wrong. Like it had never existed. She found her own boots by a tree she'd never seen. Put them on. Kept walking. They were tested for exposure. Nothing flagged. One had a notebook in her bag, blank except for 12 pages filled with phrases she didn't remember writing. Half were written in handwriting that wasn't hers. The mirror was boxed and sealed for analysis. During transit, it shattered without force. Each fragment reflected different angles of a room it had never been in. One shard displayed the back of a hand that held no camera. Another showed a blank sky. One reflected only static. Of the rest, no sign remained. No bodies. No gear. No ash. No campsite. Just a slope where the cave had once opened, flat, clean, without impression. Questions remained open. Memories refused to settle. The two survivors never spoke to each other again. One moved inland. The other left the country. Both received a message 6 months apart. No return address. No sender. Just a recording. 3 minutes of someone breathing in a room with no sound. At the end, a voice asked the same question twice. Neither of them could remember who the voice belonged to. But both agreed it wasn't a stranger. The first repetition came through a voicemail left by an intern in a coastal city who'd never been near the ridge, never heard the word Borjomi. She left a message for her supervisor at 4:16 a.m., mumbling through sleep. Her final words matched a sentence logged months earlier, one that had been spoken beside a dying campfire, half buried in wind. No transcript had ever been made public. No video released. But the phrasing matched. 14 words. Same sequence. Same inflection. No known connection. The message was deleted without urgency. It surfaced later, during a database sync, when the voice was flagged for tone anomalies. By then, the intern no longer worked there. She'd transferred 3 weeks after the recording, citing a desire for more sunlight. Her new role placed her on night shift in a basement archive. She claimed not to remember making the call. A digital record pulled from the recovered external drives revealed more confusion. One folder, titled Entry 2, contained 63 files, all marked with the same timestamp. The contents differed slightly. Same file names. Similar footage. Small variations. In one, the lens dripped condensation, in another, bone dry. One showed 5 figures walking into frame. One showed 6. In one, the sun had no direction. Each file encoded with the same metadata signature. Each one ending with the same breath. The breath was not a sigh. Not speech. Just presence. None of the original researchers lived in the same time zone anymore. None by design. Dispersal occurred without coordination. One refused video calls. Another kept a single light on throughout the night, claiming shadow movement triggered migraines. One stopped writing entirely, convinced that language held shape only under observation. Journals remained blank for months. Pages left untouched unless someone else entered the room. They shared no correspondence. Not after the second incident. That one surfaced during an academic conference on geological anomalies. A speaker delivered a prepared script to a room of 42 people. The transcript released afterward included a passage never uttered. A paragraph of unrelated content slipped into the official archive. It matched, word for word, an audio recording captured inside the cave, something only the team had heard. The speaker swore no such words had been spoken. Video confirmed it. Her lips never moved during that section. The passage arrived anyway, printed, logged, preserved. No correction was issued. Just silence. In one city, 2 men crossing paths on a stairwell paused and spoke the same phrase at the same moment. Not hello. Not small talk. A sentence with no meaning, no context, spoken in exact unison. Surveillance footage captured it. The phrase hadn't been spoken since the cave was mapped. Sleep lost its distinction. One of the 2 survivors, without prompting, without recall, drew corridors in her notepad every 3rd day. Always the same shape. A loop that didn't quite close. One hallway always stretched too far, pulling the geometry just enough to strain the edge of the page. She never used rulers. The measurements remained consistent across 37 drawings. The other received a photo in the mail with no return address. Printed in black and white. A shot of the cave interior. Familiar. The path lit by 2 lanterns. Dust suspended in air. 6 figures visible. 5 known. 1 unfamiliar. No face. No posture that made sense. No movement, yet the blur didn't match stillness. The figure stood near the rear. Head tilted. One hand held forward, almost touching the shoulder of someone who no longer remembered being touched. He burned the photo in his sink. Woke the next day to find the same image folded beneath his pillow. This version contained no figures. Only the cave. But the dust formed shapes. Lines. Something close to handwriting across the frame. It spelled no language. But it was familiar. Another found her own voice buried in a podcast archive. Not in an interview. Not in speech. As part of ambient sound, layered beneath the background hum of machinery. Whispering a phrase she hadn't said aloud since the field camp dissolved. She played it 4 times. On the 5th, it disappeared. No one officially closed the expedition. No final report. Just boxes moved into storage, sealed with names that didn't match the manifest. One package contained 2 identical journals. One dated forward, one back. Inside both, the same inscription. Exit was never direction. No further expeditions were approved. Not to that region. Not under that project name. But one satellite still pings once every 12 days. Always the same time. Always from a location 2 kilometers east of where the cave once opened. No structure appears in imagery. No interference logged. Just the same coordinates and the same return code. It spells a single word. Repeated 4 times. Always in reverse. Never translated. Never the same. Thank you for watching and sticking with me to the end. Now, if you believe humanity deserves a future among the stars, do subscribe now. Only those who'd abandon Earth to its fate will scroll past.